Look at these 3 words written larger than the rest, with a special pride never written before or since. Tall words proudly saying, "We the people."
Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Ask an Attorney. I'm your host, John Arens, the newest to the LexRex Institute. We have our president, Alexander Haberbush. How are you, sir?
Hi, doing well, John. Thanks so much for hosting this again. You've been great the past several times, so I think we're going to keep you on.
I certainly hope so. The pay is good. Not really. But anyway, just out of curiosity, talking about pay, talking about money, the Biden administration recently came out with a plan to forgive some student debt.
Yeah.
As a financial advisor, I've been fielding some questions from my clients. How does this affect us? How does this affect our plan?
Right.
What are the specifics about it? But I couldn't help but think, what would a constitutional advocate, somebody who studied the Constitution, because I know somebody that did.
Where is he? I don't.
He is
Someone
the president of
behind
LexRex Institute. Believe it or not, no, it's you, it's him. So I have to ask you, what is the constitutionality behind this? What does our Constitution say about what the Biden administration did?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you phrased it that way, because there's a few issues going on here. There's been people out there who've said that it's unconstitutional for federal government to get rid of student loan debt. That might be true. That's certainly an iffier area than what the Biden administration has done.
Okay.
What the Biden administration has done is sort of akin to an executive order. I'm sure you've probably heard of executive orders before.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's just to be clear, it's not actually an executive order. The day this came out, every single media outlet announced, Biden issues executive order getting rid of student loan debt. So first thing I did was I Googled, because I don't trust what news outlets say about legal matters. So I Googled text of Biden's executive order student loan debt.
Which normally we'd be able to find that, right?
Ordinarily, that'd be your
that
first
be something difficult
you might
to
get
find.
a couple ads as your first result, but at least on the first page you would get the text of the executive order.
So we could find it. If it was out there and it happened, we could find it.
Yeah.
So what'd you find?
I found nothing as far as an executive order was concerned, and the reason for that is there actually has technically not been an executive order issued yet. So,
okay.
for those who do know, I think it's always good to have a refresher.
Sure.
What an executive order does is it's basically an order from the president's desk directly, signed by the president of the United States, and it's issued to sort of the different departments, the different executive departments, people who work for the president. So he'll say, I am directing the Secretary of Education to do X, Y, Z, and he could have, not constitutionally, but structurally, there's nothing to keep him from writing a piece of paper that says, I'm directing Secretary of Education to get rid of $10,000 student loan debt. He could have done it that way, still would have had constitutional problems, but he could have done that.
Okay.
That's not what he did.
What did he do?
Instead, sort of the only documents that you can find on this, if you look online, are basically a series of advertisements that have been put out by the Department of Education telling you why it's a great program.
Like marketing?
Yeah, like marketing.
Oh, okay.
You probably, if you looked it up for your clients, you probably ran into that on the White House website.
I did. That's right where I was directed, and in fact, we were directed through the company, hey, this is where you go, this is where the information is.
Yeah, it's sort of a fact sheet on what the Biden administration intends to do,
right.
But it is fundamentally an ad. It's not actually law.
Wow.
And the reason for that is because it's not entirely clear how the Biden administration intends to structure this debt relief action.
Okay.
They intimated, or at least President Biden did, in his speech the day that they issued this guidance, he intimated that he intends to go to Congress to get this ratified ultimately. Now, if he did that, he'd be on much, much firmer legal footing. But I'm not going to talk about that too much. Just briefly, I'll say, there's some issues there too, because a lot of this federal student loan debt was issued by private companies pursuant to state law, not pursuant to federal law. So those debts are still governed under state law. There is some wiggle room there. We would probably still bring cases saying it was unconstitutional, even if Congress did do it. But certainly that would be, if they wanted to do this, that'd be the kosher way to do it. Would be to have Congress pass a law saying that they are going to get rid of this much student loan debt for everybody.
Got it.
That's not what happened. They appear to be going through the executive to do this, not the legislature, the executive branch. And the closest thing to an actual official statement that's not just some kind of ad that they have issued is this 5-page document issued by the Secretary of Education. What this is basically an argument for why what the Biden administration is trying to do is legal. Other words, why it would be legal to issue an executive order getting rid of student loan debt in the fashion that's sort of been described by the media on this. Now, I don't know how much you know about what they say in this, but I'll just tell you what my thoughts were as a constitutional attorney when I first heard they were going to get rid of $10,000 each of student loan debt. I figured, surely this is going to be done pursuant to a 1963 Education Act. It's called the Higher Education Act of 1963. It's now codified as 20 U.S. Code 1082A6. What that says is the Secretary has the authority to modify, compromise, waive, or release any right, title, claim, lien, demand, however acquired, including any equity or right of redemption. So that's kind of fancy language to describe debt, right? You know that, John, because you work in finance. But basically, the Secretary has the authority to waive or release any debt. That sounds pretty unequivocal, right?
It sounds, plain to me.
However, the preamble to that section of the Act also says, in the performance of and with respect to the functions, powers, and duties vested in him by this part, the Secretary may. In other words, he may do those things I just described, get rid of debts, only in the performance of and with respect to the functions, powers, and duties vested in him. In other words, he can get rid of debt wherever Congress has told him he can get rid of debt.
Okay, that's the law. That's what's in the code.
Yeah, that's what's in the code. So what then becomes the question is, has Congress told the Secretary of Education that he can get rid of debts?
Well, didn't you just tell me and our viewers here that the president was going to them to get this done? So that hasn't been done.
That's not what they may end up doing that, and I'm not commenting on the legality of that.
Sure.
I'm just here talking about if the president does it himself, and that's what the Secretary of Education addressed in this memorandum, this 5-page memorandum they issued. They say, yes, Congress has given the Secretary of Education the authority to get rid of student loan debt. You know when they did it?
Well, I mean, it would have had to have been recently, right?
No,
not recently?
Not recently at all, really.
Oh, gosh, how long ago?
Well, just after a little event called September 11th, 2001.
Wow, okay, that was only 21 years ago.
Yeah, it's in a little act called the HEROES Act. You've heard of the Patriot Act before. Well, this one's the HEROES Act.
HEROES Act, got it.
And what this act did was it gave Secretary of Education the authority to cancel or modify student loan requirements during periods of, and this is statutory language, war or other military operation or national emergency.
Well, I don't think our country is in war technically.
Other than the war on drugs, right? Wait, if you talk about war, we've declared a war. We haven't been in one since World War II. All of our wars have been undeclared since that point. But
I mean, the war on drugs they couldn't use, so what did they use?
No, they couldn't use. Well, they used the war on the coronavirus, John. That's the national emergency that's used as the Secretary's authority to cancel debt obligations of student loan debt is the COVID-19 pandemic. Sort of the catch-all emergency, right? There doesn't seem to be very much the federal government doesn't think they can do as a result of that emergency.
Okay, help me out with history a little bit because you're better on this. But wasn't there a time in the past that they had maybe declared that the emergency was over, which means that they'd have to re-declare the emergency?
Yeah, good.
Now,
John, it's almost like we've gone through this once before today.
Well, no,
you anticipated the next thing I was going to say.
Yeah, this is completely off the cuff, actually. I don't have any notes or anything. So,
right.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
This is not off the cuff, by the way.
No, we practiced somewhat.
Yeah, but the first take didn't turn out, so we're trying it again.
No, it didn't.
But, you're exactly right. So, President Trump, during his administration, had used Title 42 to issue an order that allowed the deportation of illegal aliens for public health reasons during the pandemic. That makes sense. And part of the emergency powers that's given to the president for the COVID-19 pandemic are going to be things relating to public health.
Right.
There's public health threat of illegal aliens entering the country when they have not been properly screened in terms of their health. So he was deporting illegal aliens pursuant to that Title 42 order.
For health of the country, essentially.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
President Biden ended that.
President Biden ended that.
He ended that, yes. He said that the emergency that had created the need for that policy was no longer in effect because the pandemic was over.
Okay.
Nevertheless, I guess the pandemic's back now that we need student loan debt forgiveness, so that's where the administration's chosen to go on this one. Now, going back to the legal reasoning that they use in this 5-page memorandum, about 2 pages of it are devoted to actually spelling out that legal reasoning. They rely pretty much in whole on one section. It's going to be 20 U.S. Code 1098BBA1 and 2A. Which says that the Secretary may waive or modify any statutory or regulatory provision applicable to the student financial assistance programs, if the Secretary deems such waivers or modifications necessary to ensure at least one of several enumerated purposes, including that borrowers are not placed in a worse position financially. In other words, they're saying there's a few different reasons Secretary can do this, written into the statutory code, one of which is if borrowers are not placed in a worse position financially. Forgiving $10,000 or $20,000 worth of debt places you in a better position financially, therefore the Secretary can do it.
Therefore it's okay.
Yeah, you follow the reasoning on that?
Oh, sure.
You know, the problem with that...
Oh, there's a problem.
I mean, you may have noticed the problem already just from the fact that what kind of crazy act says that you can do it as long as it doesn't place people in a worse position financially, right?
There's a number of things that we could say. The list goes on.
I mean, yeah, if they were to... Well, I'm not even going to get
into it. No,
but anyway, I looked up this law because I wanted to see the authority they were relying on here, and conveniently they left out the other statutory sections. So there's a section A, B, C, D, E. That's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections in this?
Yeah, yeah.
One of which is that it doesn't place the borrower in a worse position financially, but there are 4 other things listed here. But importantly, John, what's that word?
That says and. For the viewers, it says and.
And so we list, requirement number 1, requirement number 2, requirement number 3, requirement number 4, and requirement number 5.
Okay.
If you have a list of things that you have to do that includes the word and, like if I were to say, I will only let someone borrow my car if they are 18 years of age, if they have a driver's license, if they have a clean driving record, and if I like them.
Okay, 4 things.
If I say those 4 things are required, and you come to me and you say, I'm 18 years of age, I should be allowed to borrow your car. Does that make sense? Does that follow as an argument?
I didn't qualify 75% of the time.
You didn't qualify 75% of the requirements. That's right.
Qualify at all.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They've read this as, to use a little bit of legalese here, they've read it as a disjunctive list, when the and conjunction makes it pretty clear this is a conjunctive list. In other words, all of these things need to be true in order for them to forgive a loan.
In order for this to happen.
Yeah, not just one of them. So that's a pretty blatant misreading here. The only reason I get into that sort of nitpicky, sort of pedantic topic or level of detail here is because I want to make a point. They know full well that what they're trying to do here is not legal.
They being
the Secretary of Education and the Biden administration.
Thank you. Yeah.
They know full well what they're trying to do is not legal. In fact, 3 pages of this basically defense that they put out aren't even defending the policy as such. They're acknowledging the fact that in January of 2021, the Secretary of Education had actually issued a different memorandum saying, again, it was about the HEROES Act. Again, it was about the possibility of forgiving student loan debt. Only in that one, a little difference, the conclusion was that they did not have the authority to forgive student loans pursuant to the HERO Act. That was exactly what the Department of Education concluded then. So they devote the remaining 3 pages of this to explaining why that previous directive from the Department of Education was wrong.
Okay, this is lunacy on multiple levels. This is absurd.
It's not great.
No.
Yeah.
No. But just thinking about the ramifications, how is this going to affect people that have now read this on the White House website? They've seen, I'm going to get my 10,000, I'll get my 20. I mean, I've been fielding questions. You have too, and it almost seems as if it's done. The impression is it's already done, but in fact it's not. It's not done.
That's one of our important takeaways today. It is not done. They have announced a plan to forgive student loan debt. It has not actually come into effect. And let's just think about the what's going on here.
Yeah.
Biden administration's issued a plan that they know is not legally enforceable. What are they expecting to happen with this? Well, there's one of 2 things they can expect to be happening. First one, and I'll get into this a little bit more in a minute or 2. First one could just be they're thinking, well, it might be illegal, but nobody has standing to sue over it. That might be right. At the very least, Congress has standing to sue over it. If a member of Congress wanted to say the president stripped me of my constitutional authority and given it to the Secretary of Education, they could say that. They could certainly sue over it. Okay. But others can sue too. We'll get into that in a minute. The other thing that could be going on here, and I think this is the more likely of the two options, is they know full well this is going to be challenged in court, and the court is not going to uphold this action. At that point, what they can do is they can say, look, we tried our best to forgive student loans, but this mean old court, probably the Supreme Court, which they've done their best to malign over the past year or so, told us that we couldn't do it. It's a ploy, I think.
Sounds like manipulation.
And it would be laughable, that sort of ploy would be laughable if it weren't for the fact that people are now going to plan their lives around getting this $10,000, $20,000 of student loans forgiven.
People are right now planning
That's
their
why
lives
they're calling you, John.
Against that.
Right.
They want clarity. They want to know. And $10,000 to $20,000 is not something to scoff at. It is a lot of money. So it just concerns me as a citizen of the U.S., as a proud citizen of the U.S., that we can essentially be not made a fool, but we're being told a story. And this story affects our lives.
That's true.
And that's why I believe you started this organization.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we believe that the rule of law should apply to everyone. They shouldn't be allowed to tell you a story illegally and get away with it unscathed. And we're not even getting into that here, but when this was initially announced, lots of folks, political commentators, talked about how this destroys people's ability to plan financially, because there were tons of people, millions of people in this country who decided they were not going to take on massive amounts of student loans for whatever reason. They may have turned down very promising opportunities because they didn't want student loans. Worse still, the people who did take on these student loans now have increased earning capacity as a result.
Correct.
While these people who didn't take on the student loans do not have that increased earning capacity. So to just basically negate the fact that people made decisions over this really does disadvantage one group in favor of the other one.
Right.
And worse still, it's disadvantaging, at least ostensibly, the group that has less earning capacity, has less education, disadvantaging them in favor of the ones that are better equipped. So that's obviously heinous. But I think it's even worse to tell people that you are going to be forgiving their debt if you know full well that it is very likely that's not going to happen.
Alexander, I completely agree with you. I think our viewers agree with you. The interesting thing is this topic is so big, we may do a two-part, especially with things come up, because as you can imagine, as things materialize, we're going to get more information, and we'll make sure to let our viewers know. So with that being said, I'd like to thank everybody for your time today.
Well, we do want to talk about what we can do about it, though.
Well, I was getting right into that. I just wanted to thank them because there are multiple things that they could do. So if you'd like to go ahead and let our viewers know what they can do to protect themselves.
Sure, I don't mean to interrupt John thanking you guys.
No, you're fine.
But so what can we do about this? Yes. I mentioned the standing issue a minute ago.
Sure.
Certainly members of Congress have standing. I don't think standing is limited to members of Congress. Okay. I think anybody who did not take on a federal student loan has standing to sue over this, because their right to there's a tort called interference with contracts.
Okay.
And I believe their contracts have been interfered with. Federal government has made those contracts less meaningful, has deprived them of the consequences of their decision, at their expense has subsidized somebody else. I believe there's a private right of action on this, and we're going to be assisting individuals in bringing lawsuits over exactly this issue. Now, I encourage individual lawsuits on this. I don't want to, that's not legal advice, that's the advice I've been given to people who call in. We may put out, in the near future, depending on sort of our liability on this, we may put out templates so that you can file a lawsuit yourself against the Biden administration. We're going to sue Joe Biden personally, we're going to sue the Secretary of Education, and we're going to sue the administration. And we may put out templates on how to do that. So be prepared for that, but I do think that any individual at whose expense this was done should be seeking legal recourse on this, because we got to hold the Biden administration accountable here. Yeah,
wouldn't matter who it was. Yeah. You would be here fighting.
That's right.
To make sure that rights are being appropriately understood.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and it's and this is, I mentioned this on our first take. I think I ought to mention it again.
Sure.
That states of emergency are the classic way that people's rights get taken away. It's a classic way that tyrants ignore the law, that they get around the law. They say, well, it's an emergency, we don't have to follow it right now. Nothing about the COVID-19 pandemic creates a state of emergency that in any way specifically requires the forgiveness of student loan debt, regardless of your opinion on whether this ought to be done through the appropriate channels in the appropriate means. The abuse of emergency power to declare something like this null and void, I think, ought to frighten every single one of us.
Well, not to mention it was a year and 8 months ago.
That's the thing, is it's perpetual emergency too.
It's done. Oh wait, no, it's back.
Yeah.
Okay, those are the games that I don't like.
We don't want perpetual.
We cannot play or plan our lives.
Yeah, when we on
that.
the one hand say that an emergency justifies essentially ignoring our laws, and on the other hand say that the emergency goes on perpetually, well, you've just created a situation where we're perpetually ignoring our laws.
Correct.
That's a huge problem. Lex Rex Institute will fight that at every opportunity. I just wanted to briefly talk about that. That's how Sulla took power in Rome over 2,000 years ago. This isn't new. The Biden administration is not pulling a fast one here. They're not being creative. This is the same way that people have abused the rule of law forever. They declare a state of emergency, make it last forever, and then do whatever they want during that state of emergency. So let's not let them get away with that. Let's fight back.
No, let's get our lives back.
Yeah.
Let's get the livelihood. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to recommend, if you'd like to assist in this organization, if you would like to assist in the cause, helping we the people, please go to lexrex.org/donate to contribute to the nonprofit advocacy that is here. We are a 501c3 nonprofit group.
So you can write it off on your taxes.
Absolutely, right. Thank you for mentioning that. Also, if you have any questions, legal questions, we can go to lexrex.org/legal, if that's correct. And then these lovely books behind us, if you do make a donation, my personal favorite, The Constitution with the Declaration of Independence.
And I want to make a special plug for Edmund Burke's Reflections on the Revolution in France today, too, because this point that we just talked about you can basically declaring a state of emergency so that you can take away people's rights and ignore the rule of law. It's happened before. It happened in the French Republic early on. Edmund Burke writes about exactly that. If you've not read it before, it's really worth a read.
I'm sure you've heard this, and this is what it reminds me. History doesn't repeat itself, but oftentimes it rhymes. So we will leave that, folks.
Or I liked Captain Picard said, those who fail to learn from history are destined to repeat its mistakes. And that's a very wise man, that Captain Picard.
Yeah, we know you're a Star Trek fan. Okay, we know that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of it. Alexander, as always, thanks for the work you're doing.
Thank you, John.
God bless you, my friend.